Hey guys, welcome back to Dave Does It. I'm Dave, and sometimes we do things. And what we're doing today is we're talking about Little Blue here and how the shootout went. So it's been 1 week since we tried to go to the DSM shootout, and as you've seen in the last video, we didn't even get to make a pass. So over the course of this week, a lot of photos were released, as you've seen in the thumbnail. That gentleman who took that photograph sent me this whole photo collage that I'll show you now, and it's kind of explains what happened is how the truck broke. You can see us coming up to the line and everything looked good, and there's a big chunk or flakes of rust falling off the diff, which I'm assuming that's when everything broke. And the track officials came out. So luckily, all this happened right at the starting line. If it did kick that axle out, halfway down the track, it could have got pretty hairy. And since the truck had a mini spool in it, I wouldn't really be able to tell or feel that until the truck pulled. Luckily, it kicked the axle right away, so I felt the truck kind of dip to the left, and that's why I was able to stop when we launched it there at the tree. I kind of laughed because the first track official to run out when I got out of the truck, he threw a rag down, and he just looked at me. He's like, "It's always these S10s." And that just kind of made me chuckle, because everybody knows the rear end's the problem and you try to squeak by. But I got the rear end apart finally. I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I was talking about just going ahead and spending the money and ordering a turnkey 9-inch. And, I've mentioned over the course of the build for this that we have to do something with the frame. And I've looked at a couple local for sale ads and found some affordable frames. I talked to a friend of mine that parts vehicles out. He has a junkyard and he has a really clean truck there that we talked about buying a frame. But then it's like, I did all this work for nothing. So I think my end goal is going to be, we're gonna acquire another frame. I'm gonna build that frame. So I'll put the built rear end in that. I know how I gotta modify the front cross member now to get this set up to fit. And that way I could do some of the rear leaf spring mods on that other frame, where get rid of the shackles, put in the sliders, set up the assassin bars, maybe do a split mono leaf, and kind of work off of that, so when the time comes I could just flop everything over. The truck now should be around the 400 horsepower range. I'm limited on fuel. I do have the want to upgrade the injectors. So the injectors are my limiting factor right now, and it's because it's what I had, right? And I've explained that in the past that we were cheating that with the Evo MAF sensor. So we kind of work out on the scaling because we didn't have anything to tune with. Well, I got to get caught up on some of the finance stuff from the build, because we got kind of card happy for all the little piddly stuff we needed. I have received my DSM Link chip from ECM Link. So we can now data log, tune, make revisions to anything, and I'd be able to fully see, what my injector duty cycle is, how much I could actually turn it up, take a appropriate data log. So some of the things that we did to cheat here, I got to undo. So I'll have to reset base timing, but I could upload my timing map then, my target AFR tables. I could actually set the correct dead time for these injectors, tell it I'm using this mass airflow meter, so all the scaling and calculations within the ECU are going to be correct. So with that, I'm going to get that chip in. We're going to put the truck back together on the stock rear end. I pulled that apart this morning, and looking at the hindsight being 2020, I think this axle may have been damaged, not broken, but damaged prior to me doing anything. And why I say that is, in the build videos, I was exhausted. I was out here to all kinds of crazy hours, just nonstop trying to thrash this thing together to make the shootout. And something simple that I should have looked at, and I did. So I had a really hard time pulling the driver's side spider gear off the axle splines when I put the mini spool in. And I did this at 3 in the morning. And looking back at that, and I'll show you guys here in a minute what the axle stub looks like that broke. I also had a hard time getting that mini spool half back on the axle. So the way that the axle twisted and sheared, it actually looks like it was cracked previously because there's some dark gray areas in the axle, and then there's some shiny bits that look like a fresh twist and break. When it did that, there's multiple cracks in the splines of the axle shaft itself, in front of, where the axle broke, and that actually cracked the mini spool case. I spent a couple hours this morning trying to get that apart with the air chisel and some air hammers. So for now, the plan is there's a local rear end guy that has a set of stock axles out ready to be stuffed in. They're pretty affordable. I'm going to get with him this afternoon and purchase those axles. I have to go to Summit and buy another mini spool. And we're going to just put the rear end back together, get the DSM link chip set up, and we're going to drive the truck for the remainder of the season, however short that may be. But at least then we'll get some appreciation for all that hard work that we've done over the last couple weeks to get to this step. And we can start working out some of the bugs and quirks and know where we have to move forward. I have that issue with the intake manifold bolts keep loosening up. Part of that could probably be solved with some wave lock washers. Right now, I don't have any washers on the intake manifold. I think a lot of it has to do with that epoxy spacer that my friend Kevin printed for me to compensate for the different intake manifold and cylinder head port sizes, having different expansion rates than the actual aluminum of the cylinder head and the intake manifold. So I'm going to put some wave lock washers on there and see if that potentially corrects that issue. And we're just going to cruise around. And then come winter, I'll make that deciding factor if we're going to look for somebody's aborted project and find a nice roller that already has a built rear end, maybe a roll bar, a clean frame, right? And kind of swap everything over, or if I'm just going to buy a frame and kind of set it up myself and, pay as you go. I am self-employed, so a lot of this is extremely hard for me. I used to, what I do for employment now used to be like my side gig, right? So like my day job was my house money, the side gig was how I did this stuff. And now my side gig is my full-time gig, and that's house money. So this becomes a lot harder to do. So I gotta see financially what the best course is if I end up just saving over the winter and then try to find somebody's roller come tax time maybe, or if we're just gonna buy a frame and piece it together as we go and then just kind of upgrade, since I know where we need to be, I know what we have to do, and we'll just, take it piece by piece. But right now, with the weight of this truck and the power it's making, it should be a low 11-second truck in a perfect world. I don't know how that's going to translate to everything. I've never played with these motors in a rear-wheel drive application, so this is the first for me. I've always been a Colt guy or a Mirage guy, done some all-wheel drive stuff. So it's going to be a bit of a learning curve. I know the next weak link is going to be this T5 that I have. So we'll just address that as it goes. But I'll get you guys off the tripod. I'll take you around to the back of the truck. We'll talk about, what I found inside the diff. I'll show you the broken Carnage, and then we got some treasure also. So we did get one score at the shootout, and that was this 2G head right here. So it's a really fresh looking head. The guy said it was reman and the motor came apart. So the problem with this head is it has bent valves. Not a big deal. My buddy Mike hooked me up with this other head right here, and it looks like somebody hit the deck surface with a grinder. Like, it's worse than my block, right? I'd flip it over and show you, but I got all the rockers sitting in here, and I pulled the cam, so I don't want to lose those. But he hooked me up with the cylinder head. I have 7 Eagle rods, a full set of Wiseco pistons for a 2-liter. Those are 3 JE85 pistons, and that ECU he gave me for 150 bucks. So there was a bonus to this. These camshafts sitting here, I know they look a little rough. We were trying to polish them out. I started trying to polish this lobe with just a little bit of not emery cloth, the red Scotch-Brite and some WD-40. It seems to be cleaning up well. So these cams that came in the $50 head are Delta copies of Kelford 272s. So 272 is, like the go-to cam, right? But the Kelfords are very unique in that. So the 272s, they're advertised duration, but the ramp profile on these camshafts are more aggressive than some 288s. So this is kind of like a sweet perk. As much as I want to buy a set of valve springs and just dump them in to see what happens, we're going to wait till we build a motor. And I don't know if I'm going to build this 1.8. I did talk to Wiseco, and they could take an off-the-shelf 4G63 piston and just downsize it to the bore size of this 1.8. Or I could run this 1.8 and bore it to 85 millimeter for a 4G63. So I have to weigh those options out. I'd really like to sonic check the cylinder walls to see how thick there is. Online, there's a bunch of people that have done it and have had good results, but nobody can say what the cylinder sleeve thickness still is, right? And that needs to be a concern. These do crack sleeves when they start getting thin. Darton makes a sleeve for these now, which is kind of cool, but I don't want to get that overzealous, right? We're going to do a standard Eagle Wiseco combo. You know, this little turbo on here is good for 500 horse maxed. When I hit that and everything works good, I'll probably put a 35R on it, and we'll be around 700. And that's probably going to be where this truck lives. But enough ranting about the Treasure. That's kind of some of the bonuses that we got. We got a cool set of cams, 2 heads. I'm not going to change the head until we build a motor. I'm not doing the cams till we build a motor, but I have some pieces here to build a motor, right? So that's kind of cool. Here's the axle shaft. So as you can see, why I think it was previously damaged, we have all this gray metal. It's aged in the crack. And then you have shiny metal right here in the center and around this perimeter. That was the fresh brake. And then when I show you the splines over here, you'll kind of understand why. So I should have pulled these out and looked at them when I did the rear end. But if the camera focuses, it's cracked all the way through the splines. And that would have been why I had such a hard time pulling that spider gear off and putting the mini spool on. And I'm not even sure if it's going to be able to, camera will show you the mini spool here, but there is a crack right there. I don't know if it'll focus, if you can kind of see that crack, but it's cracked on this sleeve here, actually in 2 spots. Yeah, you can kind of see that angle. You get the lip of it. And there's the other one. So regardless, throwing another stock axle in it. I got to go buy another cheap mini spool. I honestly would probably just throw spider gears back in it, but I threw all that stuff away like a dummy. So we're doing budget, slamming the truck back together, and we're going to go do a couple shows and just cruise it around. Enjoy the last little bit of the season as we go into fall here. And then come winter time, we'll make some decisions on what the next course of action is. We might also have a surprise coming up. Mrs. C has recently got bitten by the bug and said that she really missed her Evo after going to the shootout. So there's some local cars that we're kind of looking at. It's something that I'm familiar with, right? I've had a bunch of them, but we're going to see what her decision is and if we're going to move forward on those. Again, it comes down to finances and some of the other things that we have going on, right? Since I don't work a normal day job. So we got to be mindful of these expenses, and we kind of pay as we go, right? You know, I've been selling off a lot of my treasure in the overstock treasure trove here to make a lot of this happen. So with that said, we're going to keep trucking forward. The next time you guys see me in the truck, it should be back on the ground, and I could finally take you for that ride-along video that everybody's been waiting for. And we're just going to go have a good time and cruise around and enjoy the last little bit we have. So, again, thank you guys for joining in. I greatly appreciate you coming around for the build process. The positivity's been awesome. So, with that, remember, kindness is free. It doesn't cost you anything to be a decent person, and try to inspire someone.